for 4.5 years straight, 23-hour lockdown in the most hellish, barbaric environment you can imagine. And I remember I would walk around that little cell, just like this. Every day, that was my exercise. And I would walk and I would think, and I would ask myself these tough questions. How did I go from being an honor roll scholarship student with dreams of being a doctor to serving out my most promising years in the most barbaric space you can imagine in American society? And the constant asking those questions wouldn't allow me to rest in the insanity that the environment is designed to produce. Like, there's no other reason in the environment other than to break and shatter your humanity that solitary confinement exists. They say within 30 days, most humans begin to lose some of their mental faculties. In 90 days, you're basically deemed crazy. And for 4.5 years straight, I existed in that insane environment. And so I found myself in solitary confinement at a point in my life where I was actually finding myself. And so in the midst of this moment happened. And it was one of the most profound moments in my life. Now, when you're incarcerated, mail means everything. I don't know how many of y'all have done some time. Mike, I know you got a little something in your field back there. But mail call is like the quietest time of day in prison. Because everybody's sitting with the emotional anticipation of hoping that somebody on the outside just send them a note and say, you know what? I thought about you today. I care about you today. I'm here to support you. And so I don't care how tough you are. I don't care how savvy you are. Mail call is the reality check for life in prison because everybody's vulnerable. And one or two things happen. Either you act like you really don't care. I don't care about no mail. I don't care if nobody come through. It's a defense mechanism that you learn to use to block out the pain of when nobody shows up in your life when you need them most. And so I had the last cell on the tier. That was kind of like the privileged cell because I ran the yard, so they like we put them in the best cell possible in solitary, if that makes any sense. It's the best cell. You got the penthouse in solitary. And there was like a little crack that I could see down the tier, just enough to see when the officers was coming and to get a glimpse of like one of my neighbors if they got out so I can at least know who I'm talking to up under the door. But it was literally a small sliver, and I could see. And so on mail call, I would watch the officer go from cell to cell. And he had that stack of mail, and it would get smaller and smaller the closer he got to my cell. And I would always think to myself, like, man, I hope by the time he get here, he still has a couple of letters. And so on this particular day, I hit what's considered the lotto of mail call. I got multiple letters. I got letters from friends and other joints. Got a letter from my father, who was my biggest supporter while I was in prison. And I got a letter from my son. And so I read to see what was happening in the lives of my friends and other joints, read their letters. And I read my father's letter. And I saved my son's letter for last. And typically it was the other way around. Usually I would read my son's letter because he was just writing about school or whatever. And then I would read my father's letters because he was always, me and him would debate stuff and talk about different things. But when I opened my son's letter, I realized immediately there was something different about this letter than any other letter he ever sent me. Because in the right-hand corner, in big, bold letters, he wrote, "Dear Dad, my mom told me why you're in prison, for murder." He said, "Dad, don't kill again. Jesus watches what you do." Hearing those words from my son, who was 10 at the time, shattered every aspect of hood savvy, street toughness, prison yard rule. And it challenged me in a way that I never thought anything would challenge me before. Because in that moment, what I realized is that I didn't owe my son an explanation. I owe him a father. And in order to be the father that he needed, I had to change things in my life to honor my responsibility as his father. And so I started to ask those tougher questions of what made you make that decision that night. And I began to write, and I went backwards and I started writing. And I started writing about the moments where I saw the change in myself. See, when I first hit the streets, I was a naive, green kid. I'm like giving crack away. You know, I'm all nice and generous. Oh yeah, just, you can come pay me 3 weeks from now. You know, naive as can be. But shortly, the streets started chipping away at that. They started chipping away at my humanity, at my softness, at my generosity. And I became hardened. And then I got to prison in this very racially tense environment, this barbaric environment, this new age of slavery. When I say slavery, I mean it in every sense of the word. Anytime that you can force a human to do demanding labor for 17 cents an hour, that's slavery. Our Constitution justifies it. The 13th Amendment, if you've never read it, I call it the P. Diddy of amendments because it remixed slavery. It just made it cuter and more sophisticated, and we fell for it. And most of us haven't even read it. I'm going to tell you what it said, the 13th Amendment. Slavery shall be abolished except for those who have been duly convicted of a crime. Prisons are plantations. Let's just be clear about it. Prisons are plantations. It's cheap labor. Some of the companies you use right now today are exploiting cheap and free labor. There's no coincidence why our prison system is one of the largest in the world. We make up 5% of the world population, but we have 25% of the prison population. And 25% of that prison population, 50 to 60% of that is Black, African, Latino, young inner city kids who made poor decisions, and sometimes who didn't make poor decisions at all, who end up in that space. So it's in that environment that I began to think about, what do I want my life outcomes to be? So as I journal, and I encourage everybody in here to journal. It's one of the most powerful tools you have at your disposal to write out and look at your thoughts to figure out where you're trying to go in life, where you've been, what you've been through. And you don't have to share it with anybody, but share it with yourself. And so as I began to journal, I began to go backwards, I began to identify things. And I realized the difference between disciplining the child and abusing the child. And I was able to finally label what happened to me abuse. I was able to finally step up and say, you know what, my mother was wrong. And that I shouldn't have had to bear the burden of her issues. Like, no child deserves that. And it's one of the hardest things, when you grew up in a Black community, one of the hardest things to say, you know what, my mother's abusive. Because we hold mothers in such high esteem, as we should, when they're being mothers. But we don't talk about those issues that impact such a large segment of our society. Those kids that you see standing on the street corner, those kids that you see hanging out at the liquor store and the gas station, they're running from something. And you have to ask them, what are you running from? See, we're very quick to judge without really stepping back and saying, what would make a child prefer the discomfort of living homeless and not knowing where their meal coming from over a house with a warm bed? Children don't run without reason. And what happens is when they run from something, they often run into things that's a little bit harder than they could have ever imagined.